Canelo versus Terrence Crawford is closer to happening than ever, in my opinion. I think it's the next fight coming up in May, that Cinco de Mayo-ish weekend. Yesterday was the Ring Magazine Awards. Canelo met with Turkey. Terrence Crawford said some things on Twitter. He's been saying some things since the new year started. We're getting closer to this fight happening. We need to touch on some big things going into this fight. Now, yesterday, Canelo was with Turkey, took a picture, they're smiling together. So there's no bad blood between the two. You know, it was safe to assume they weren't on the same page. It seems like they may be willing to negotiate and work together in some forms or aspects of the business of boxing. Now, what did Canelo say exactly? He said it's there, it's available. I'm not 100% dismissing it. Canelo's not a straightforward guy. He's going to beat around the bush. He's going to avoid a lot of questions. He said it's still on the table. I'm open to it. We're here to make the best fights happen. Terrence Crawford tweeted on January 6th, remember, all you guys doubted me. And then yesterday he tweeted, remember what you said about me. I'll put all that up on the screen right here. Now, like I said, we need to touch on some things here. First of all, this fight is going to be 168 pounds. I don't see a catchweight happening here. Canelo has all the leverage. He's not the guy moving up. Crawford is the guy moving up into his weight division. Canelo is the guy risking his titles, his legacy. Crawford has nothing to lose, nothing to risk here. The least he can do is make the super middleweight threshold. I don't see them meeting in the middleweight. I don't see Crawford negotiating it to 164, 160. It's going to be 168. It's going to be 168. It's not going to be in Saudi. It's not happening. The Riyadh season is ending. It'll be back in October. Not only that, I just don't see Canelo fighting in Saudi. He's a Vegas guy. Could I see the Saudis kind of co-promoting or sponsoring the event? Absolutely. Why not? I'm here for that. But the fight actually being Saudi, nah, I don't see it happening, man. Now, let's talk about what it means for both men to win and lose, starting off with Canelo. If Canelo wins, I'm really conflicted about this one right here. If Canelo wins, what does that do for his legacy? He's beating a guy who's number 3 on the ring pound for pound, who's jumping 2 weight classes, though he is 2-time undisputed. I don't want to give Canelo the most credit for a victory like this, but as a fan, you guys must stay consistent. A lot of people gave Marvin Hagler a ton of credit for beating guys like Tommy Hearns, the natural welterweight, and Roberto Duran, a natural lightweight. So if you give Hagler some sort of credit for that, you got to give Canelo some credit for this one right here. I don't give Hagler a ton of credit for those 2 victories. I'm not going to give Canelo a ton of credit for this one. Unless Canelo goes in there and he does something to Crawford that nobody else on the planet could possibly do. If he goes in there and he just steamrolls through him, stops him, outboxes him for 10 rounds and then we have to take into consideration the performance he displayed against a high-level pound-for-pound competitor. We have to take that into consideration, absolutely. But if he goes in there and he fights Crawford to a split decision, if he beats Crawford 7-5, 8-4, it's a great win. It's a great win. I'm going to bring it up in your all-time legacy, but it's not entirely moving me completely. But that goes back to me saying Crawford has nothing to lose here. If Crawford loses, doesn't really affect his all-time legacy. It maybe bumps him down a spot or 2, maybe even 3 on the pound for pound, but really doesn't affect his all-time legacy. Let's talk about the least likely outcome, the more unfortunate outcome for a guy like me who likes Canelo a little bit more than Crawford, who's favoring Canelo going into a fight like this, is if Crawford beats Canelo. That'll be his 3rd loss of his career. We have the Bivol, Mayweather, and then the Crawford loss. And it would make Terrence Crawford number 1 pound for pound, no doubt. It would make him the number 1 pound for pound fighter on the planet. It wouldn't make him 3-time undisputed, but in my books, he would be 3-time undisputed in 3 separate weight classes. It would also make him a 5-division champion, joining the likes of Floyd Mayweather, Tommy Hearns, Sugar Ray Leonard, Manny Pacquiao, and Oscar De La Hoya. And then he could always go to 160 and get that 6 weight division. And then, it'd be a 6 weight division only with Oscar and Manny. Now, this is what I mean when I say Crawford doesn't have a lot to risk, but he has everything to gain. If he goes in there and he beats Canelo, I think it's safe to say Terrence Crawford would be a top 10 fighter of all time. I think it's safe to say That would be the greatest victory over the last quarter century, maybe even half a century. Probably the greatest victory since Ray Leonard beat Hagler. One could argue the greatest victory of all time, especially depending on the performance. Now, if he goes in there, which is super unlikely, but if he just goes in there and Errol Spences him, we're talking about the greatest victory of all time. We're talking about probably the best fighter of all time. So not only does Crawford take a boatload of money home, his pound for pound ranking jumps to number 1. His all-time pound for pound ranking, in my opinion, jumps inside the top 10, if not 15-ish. Now let's talk about my official predictions. It's gonna be an interesting bout. At first, it's very easy to say Canelo is just gonna steamroll him because he has the weight advantage, and you could argue the boxing ability is somewhat relative, which I'm not mad at. It's easy to say Canelo's gonna just steamroll him. I think Crawford's IQ, his ability to box, his talent, where he's at in his career, he's still kind of not prime, but he's still moving extremely well for a 38-year-old. I don't think Canelo's gonna steamroll Crawford. I don't think he will. I think Crawford's he's a veteran. He knows how to survive. He knows how to box. He knows how to maneuver throughout the ring. I don't think Canelo will steamroll him. I think Canelo's gonna beat him pretty bad. I can see Canelo stopping him. I can see Crawford having a lot of moments in the fight, but very few rounds won in this fight. I think Crawford is going to be very hesitant to move forward, kind of like we seen early in the Madrigal fight. I think Crawford's going to be very hesitant to let his hands go. Like we see in the Madrigal fight, he couldn't land even 100 punches that fight. He's going to be constantly moving backwards. I think it's going to be very hard to initiate the offense. And he's a great counterpuncher, but I think Bud excels when he's counterpunching and he's also able to brawl at times. And I don't think he's able to brawl at times with Canelo. So I think half of his offensive tendencies or half of his offensive game plan in most fights is going to be cut in half tremendously. The way I'm envisioning this fight, Crawford fights off the back foot 100% of the night. Canelo takes a step or two back. Maybe Crawford comes with a 1-2-3 combination, or that 2-1-2 that puts Spence down, something like that on the guard of Canelo. Canelo takes a step back, but there will be no sequences, no exchanges, no moments, no rounds in this fight where we're looking at Canelo and saying he is being backed up. I don't see that happening. And maybe Crawford can counter him and be slick all night with his back on the ropes moving backwards. I'm not saying he can't. Matter of fact, I am saying he can't. He can't do that. You know, Crawford at times is a take one to give one guy. And against Canelo jumping this much weight, I think that's too costly. I think one good shot could end this fight. I know we haven't seen Canelo knock anybody out since Caleb Plant in 21. I want to say October, November, December, late 21. But the shots he hit Berlanga with, Munguia with, Charlo with, Ryder with, those are devastating shots for a guy who's at his best at welterweight. Those are devastating shots. So I'm going to go Canelo probably stoppage. I'm not going to predict the round because it genuinely could happen any round. But I would not be surprised if Canelo goes in there and outboxes Terrence Crawford. A lot of people kind of label Canelo as this big Mexican brute. I don't know where this narrative came from. Canelo's a terrific boxer. Go watch it. Go to my TikTok. He's a terrific boxer. High IQ, level changes, feints. His jab is super underrated. He just utilizes it in many different ways. His shot selection. Canelo is exceptionally well at boxing. I don't get it misconstrued. So I wouldn't be surprised if Canelo just sits there with Crawford, boxes him to a 9-3 unanimous decision. That is very possible. Now let's talk about if my predictions come true. Canelo goes in there and he is himself. He is Canelo Alvarez and he moves on. What's next? I think this is Canelo's last year in boxing. Next year will be his 21st year in the sport as a professional. I think this is his last year. And I think he wants to cash out. He's going to do this Crawford fight because it gives him somewhat of a legacy boost. It's better than Christian and Billy or Diego Pacheco or who else is in that super middleweight division. So he's going to do this Crawford fight. It gives him somewhat of a legacy boost. It brings him a nice little bag in. And I think he's going to target Artur Beterbiev, assuming Beterbiev beats Dmitry Bivol February 22nd, in a couple of weeks now. Is he gonna win that fight? I couldn't tell you. I genuinely couldn't tell you. I want to look at that Canelo Artur Beterbiev hypothetical fight a bit closer to the fight date. I want to look at it after Beterbiev maybe even beats Bivol. That's when I want to take a look at that fight. I do believe Canelo's going to be able to skip the line past Benavidez, Morrell, Buatsi, and all those great guys at 175. He's Canelo. He's going to skip the line for the Beterbiev undisputed title fight. I do believe he's going to aim towards that Beterbiev Bivol fight because that's the only thing that could push his all-time great status. As great as Benavidez is today, he's not really solidified. He's not really established. I try to explain that to a lot of guys. If Canelo goes out there and he knocks out Benavidez and Benavidez goes on the rest of his career, loses every fight, looks mediocre, it doesn't do much for Canelo's resume. But when you have established guys like Dimitri Bivol, like Artur Beterbiev, if he beats Beterbiev and Beterbiev loses his next 20 fights, it still looks great on his resume. I think that's the type of fight he's going to shoot for. And I think if he wants it, he's going to get it. Now, if he's going to win, like I said, I want to wait for the Beterbiev Bivol rematch to be done. I want that to be through. I want Canelo to get through whoever he fights in May on Cinco de Mayo weekend. And then, you know, we'll take a look at that fight. But you guys let me know. There's a lot to think about with these two. They both need some fights booked. They both are available. This is the perfect time to make Canelo versus Crawford. I'm going to go Canelo Alvarez. You guys let me know who do y'all got in this hypothetical matchup.